"You're not senior material," my boss said, barely glancing up from her phone. "We're giving the director role to Connor." I sat there, frozen, my pitch deck still open on the conference room screen. The one I'd spent 4 months building. The one that landed us the Meridian account, the biggest client this agency had ever signed. Connor wasn't even in the meeting. He was probably downstairs at the coffee bar, scrolling through Instagram, the way he did every morning until 10:30. But sure, give him the title. I earned it, he'd wear it. That's how it worked at Hale and Burkett, the kind of mid-size ad agency in Chicago that loves to put culture and equity on their website while running the exact same boys club they've had since 1997. My boss, Diane, finally looked up. She tilted her head like she was about to explain gravity to a toddler. "Connor has the executive presence we need for this level. You're a strong contributor, Maya. But leadership is about more than deliverables. Executive presence." I'd heard that phrase before. It usually meant tall, loud, and comfortable taking up space in rooms he didn't build. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what was I going to say? That I'd rewritten the Meridian strategy from scratch after Connor's version got laughed out of the client call? That I stayed until 1 a.m. on a Thursday fixing his budget projections because he doesn't know the difference between gross and net? That 3 of our biggest accounts specifically requested me on their teams, not him. Diane already knew all of that. She just didn't care. HR was sitting at the end of the table. A woman named Pam, who always smelled like vanilla and never made eye contact during hard conversations. She slid a manila folder toward me. "We've prepared a lateral move for you," Pam said softly. "Same pay, different department. Content strategy. It's a great growth opportunity. A lateral move. Same paycheck, smaller office, further from the accounts I built." They weren't promoting me. They were relocating me so Connor could take my chair without it looking too obvious. I closed my laptop. "I understand," I said. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my notebook, the one with every client call summary, every campaign framework, every handwritten note from late nights saving projects that had Connor's name on them, but my fingerprints all over them. I walked out. Nobody followed. Nobody said a word, but here's the thing they didn't know about me. I don't disappear quietly, I build quietly, and by the time you hear me, I've already won. The first thing I did when I got home was pour a glass of wine, sit on my kitchen floor, and cry. I'm not going to pretend I walked out of that building like some action hero. I was devastated. 4 years. 4 years of proving myself at that agency, of being the first one in and the last one out, of picking up every ball Connor dropped and never once getting the credit. And for what? A lateral move and a pat on the head. But grief has a shelf life when you've been disrespected. By midnight, the tears were dry. And I was making a list. See, I'd learned something working in advertising. Everything is a campaign. You identify your target, craft your message, choose your timing, and execute. And I was about to launch the most important campaign of my career, except this time, I was the client and the product. I spent the next 3 days organizing everything. And I mean everything. I had 4 years of email threads where Diane asked me to help Connor polish presentations that I actually wrote from zero. I had Slack messages where Connor literally forwarded my strategy briefs to clients under his name, sometimes without even changing the font. I had screenshots of him asking me, quote, "Hey, can you just throw some ideas together? I've got a lunch thing." Those ideas became the Meridian pitch that won us a $2.4 million contract. I also had something else. Performance reviews. 4 years of glowing reviews for me. Words like indispensable, exceptional, strategic mind, backbone of the creative department. And 4 years of mediocre reviews for Connor that somehow always ended with show's strong leadership potential. Potential. The most dangerous word in corporate America. It means we like your face more than her results. I didn't rush. That was important. Revenge without strategy is just noise. I gave it 2 full weeks. Let them think I'd accepted the lateral move. Let Diane feel comfortable. Let Connor settle into his new title. Post his little LinkedIn announcement, thrilled to share I've been promoted to creative director at Hale and Burkett, complete with a photo of him in a blazer he definitely bought that morning. Meanwhile, I was making calls. I'd built relationships over 4 years, not just inside the agency, but across the industry. Media buyers, brand managers, production partners. People who knew my work because they'd seen it, not because my name was ever on it. My first call was to Rachel Torres, head of brand at Meridian, our biggest account, the one I personally landed. We met for coffee on a Saturday. "Maya, can I be honest?" she said before I'd even sat down. I was confused when Connor started leading our calls. I kept asking Diane where you were. What did she say? That you'd moved into a strategic advisory role. I figured that meant a promotion. Did you get promoted? I smiled. They promoted the guy who can't spell campaign without autocorrect. Rachel didn't laugh. She leaned forward. "I want to show you something." She pulled out her phone, opened an email chain. It was an internal thread at Meridian. Her CMO had written, quote, "The new point person at Hale seems out of his depth. If quality slips, we should explore alternatives." That email was sent 11 days after my meeting with Diane. 11 days. The biggest account was already shaking, and they didn't even know it. I left that coffee meeting with Rachel's blessing and something more valuable, information. She told me that Meridian's contract with Hale and Burkett was up for renewal in 60 days. She also told me that 2 other major clients were in similar review cycles. And she said something that changed everything. "If you ever go independent, call me first." That night, I didn't sleep, not from anxiety, from adrenaline. I started building a business plan. Not a fantasy, an actual plan. Financials, projected revenue, operational costs, client pipeline. I used every template, every framework I developed at Hale and Burkett, the ones they never formally documented because I was the documentation. Within a week, I had a 12-page deck. By the end of week 2, I had an LLC registered, Luna Strategy Group. I liked the name. It felt like me, something that glows in the dark. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. And focus is far more dangerous than fury. Day 1 of my notice period. I walked into Diane's office, resignation letter in hand, and set it on her desk. She looked at it like I'd placed a dead fish on her keyboard. "You're leaving? My last day is in 2 weeks. She leaned back. "Maya, let's not be dramatic. The content strategy role is a real opportunity. I'll be working through my remaining days to ensure a smooth transition. I've already documented all active projects." She blinked. That was the part that threw her the professionalism. She expected emotion, maybe a teary plea to reconsider. She didn't expect a woman who'd already packed her parachute before stepping off the ledge. "I'll need you to brief Connor on the Meridian account," she said with a straight face. "He'll need to get up to speed quickly." Get up to speed. On the account I ran single-handedly for 3 years. The one where I knew the CMO's dog's name, the CFO's kid's soccer schedule, the brand manager's preference for decks in dark mode because she's photosensitive. But sure, let me brief Connor so he can pretend he's been doing this the whole time. "Of course," I said. "I'll send a comprehensive handoff document," and I did. I sent the most thorough, detailed, beautifully organized transition document anyone has ever seen. Every process, every contact, every note, except the things that mattered most, the relationships, the trust, the institutional memory that lived in my head and walked out the door with me. You can't hand off 4 years of earned trust in a PDF. My last day was a Friday. Nobody threw a party. Nobody even sent a group email. Pam from HR gave me a form to sign, asked me to return my badge, and said, "Best of luck, Maya." Like I'd lost a raffle. I drove home with a box of personal items, my favorite pen, a framed photo of my mom, and a coffee mug that said plot twist. I'd bought it as a joke 2 years ago. It wasn't a joke anymore. The following Monday, I sent one email to Rachel Torres at Meridian. Subject line, "New chapter." I kept it short. Told her I'd started my own firm. Outlined my approach for their upcoming campaign cycle, and attached a preliminary strategy brief. She responded in 47 minutes. "Can you present to our leadership team Thursday?" I could, and I did. I walked into Meridian's headquarters in a blazer I already owned, with a deck I'd built in 3 days that was better than anything I'd produced in 4 years at Hale and Burkett. Because this time, My name was on every single slide. The presentation took 22 minutes. The Q&A took another 15. The CMO leaned back in his chair and said, "Where has this version of you been hiding?" "She wasn't hiding," Rachel said from across the table. "She was being hidden." The room went quiet. Then the CMO nodded. "Send us the contract." I signed Meridian as my first client that Friday. $2.4 million in annual billings. The exact account I had built, now officially mine. But the story wasn't over. It was just starting to get interesting. Over the next 30 days, something happened that I didn't plan but probably should have predicted. Clients started calling me. Not because I'd reached out, most of them I hadn't, but because Connor was drowning. Without me quietly running the operation behind the scenes, the cracks showed fast. Briefs went out late, campaign timelines slipped. A media buy for one client got placed on the wrong platform, costing them $40,000 in wasted spend. Connor tried to fix it by doing what Connor always does: scheduling a meeting, talking in circles, and promising to align the team. But clients don't want alignment. They want results. Within 6 weeks of my departure, I had signed 3 more accounts. 2 of them were former Hale and Burkett clients. One was brand new, a referral from Rachel. My tiny LLC was generating more revenue than I'd earned in salary over the past 3 years combined. I hired my first employee, a woman named Desiree who DM'd me on LinkedIn after seeing my new venture post. She'd been through something similar at her last agency: brilliant work, zero recognition, a promotion that went to a guy who spent more time at happy hours than on briefs. "I don't need a title," she told me in our interview. "I need to be seen." "You will be," I said. "That's the whole point." Meanwhile, Hale and Burkett was starting to feel the damage. I heard through mutual contacts that Diane held an emergency meeting, the kind where everyone sits in a conference room and pretends not to be panicking. The agenda: client retention. The subtext: why is everyone leaving? Someone told me. Connor stood up and actually said, "I think Maya might be poaching our clients." Poaching. As if the relationships belonged to him. As if clients follow buildings instead of people. Diane reportedly responded with, "We need to strengthen our value proposition." Translation: we need to find another Maya who'll do the work while Connor takes the credit. Good luck with that. 8 weeks after I left, I got the email I'd been waiting for. Not from Diane, not from Connor. From Pam, the same HR woman who handed me that lateral move folder with the enthusiasm of a parking ticket. Subject line: confidential consulting opportunity. She wanted to know if I'd be interested in a short-term consulting engagement with Hale and Burkett. Specifically, to help them develop a client retention strategy, the same strategy I'd built and executed for free while I was employed there. The proposed rate: $250 an hour. I laughed so hard, my coffee went cold. They wanted to pay me hourly to rebuild what they had for free when I was salaried. The math was poetic. I didn't respond to Pam. Instead, I did something better. I posted on LinkedIn. Nothing dramatic, no names, no shade. Just a simple post. 8 weeks ago, I left a job where I was told I wasn't leadership material. Today, my firm manages 4 major accounts, and I just signed our 5th. To everyone who's ever been told they're not ready, maybe the room wasn't ready for you. It got 22,000 impressions in 48 hours. My inbox flooded. Partnership offers, speaking invitations, podcast requests. Women from every industry, sharing their own stories of being overlooked, undervalued, silenced. I read every single message. And I responded to as many as I could, because I remembered what it felt like to scream into a room that pretended not to hear. 3 months after I left, I was invited to speak at a Women in Advertising panel in New York. The topic: building your own table when they won't give you a seat. The event space held about 800 people. I was the closing speaker. As I waited backstage, scrolling through my notes on my phone, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around. It was Diane. She was attending the conference. Of course, she was. She was the type who went to panels about equity while practicing the opposite. "Maya," she said, like we'd bumped into each other at a grocery store. "Congratulations on everything. I've been following your journey." "Thank you, Diane." She paused. "You know, I always believed in your potential. I let those words hang in the air for a moment. That's funny, I said, because the word you used in our last conversation was contributor. Not leader, not director. Contributor. Her smile tightened. I think there may have been a miscommunication about there wasn't. But it doesn't matter now. I turned back to my notes. She lingered for a second, then walked away. 10 minutes later, I stepped onto that stage. I looked out at 800 faces. Some young, fresh out of college, hopeful and terrified. Some older, battle-scarred, arms crossed, daring me to say something they hadn't heard before. So, I told them the truth. 6 months ago, I sat in a conference room and was told I didn't have executive presence. That the role I built with my own hands belonged to someone who could barely hold a meeting without checking his phone. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I took my notebook, walked to my car, and started planning. Not because I'm extraordinary. Because I was tired. Tired of being excellent in a system that rewards mediocrity, as long as mediocrity looks the part. I talked for 18 minutes. About the emails I saved, the clients who followed me, the company I built from my kitchen table. About Desiree and the 3 other women I'd hired, all of whom had been underestimated somewhere else. About what it means to stop waiting for someone to see your worth and start invoicing for it. When I finished, the room didn't clap right away. There was this beat of silence, the kind that's heavy with recognition. Then the applause started, and it didn't stop. Afterward, a young woman, maybe 23, walked up to me with tears streaming down her face. I was going to accept a demotion on Monday, she said. I'm not going to anymore. Good, I said. And when they ask why, don't explain. Just show them what they're about to lose. That night, I sat in my hotel room, shoes off, room service on the way, and my phone lit up. An email from an address I didn't recognize. I opened it. Maya, this is Connor. I got your contact from a mutual friend. I just wanted to reach out and say, I'm sorry. I know I took credit for things you built. I told myself it was just how the game worked, but watching what you've done, I realized it wasn't a game for you. It was your life's work. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I just thought you should hear it. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my phone and stared at the ceiling. I'm not going to tell you I forgave him. That's not how this works. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip because someone writes a nice paragraph after they've already lost everything. What I will tell you is that I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel victory. I felt something quieter than that. I felt free. Because the girl who sat in that conference room, the one who heard your not senior material and believed it for exactly 11 minutes, she was gone. And in her place was a woman who didn't need a title from Diane, an apology from Connor, or a seat at their table. She'd built her own building, and the door had her name on it. 6 months in, Luna Strategy Group moved out of my kitchen and into a real office. Nothing flashy. A converted loft in the West Loop with exposed brick and too many plants, but it was ours. I hung one thing on the wall behind my desk. Not a diploma, not an award. It was a framed printout of that performance review from Hale and Burkett, the last one I ever received, the one that said, Maya is indispensable, but not yet ready for leadership. I kept it there as a reminder, not of what they said about me, but of how wrong the people who write your reviews can be. On our 6-month anniversary, I hosted a dinner for the team. 9 people now, all women who'd been overlooked somewhere, each one more talented than the people who let them go. We ordered too much Thai food, drank wine out of paper cups, and laughed until my neighbor knocked on the wall. No hierarchy, no politics, no whispered credit stealing. Just builders. Seen, valued, and finally in the right room. As I was cleaning up, my phone buzzed. A notification from LinkedIn. Hale and Burkett had posted a job listing. Creative Director, Client Strategy. Senior Leadership Role. $210,000 plus equity. I clicked on it. The job description read, like my resume. The responsibilities were my old responsibilities. The ideal candidate section described a person with my exact skill set, experience level, and industry relationships. They were trying to hire me without hiring me. I screenshot it, saved it in a folder on my desktop, and named the folder they remember. Then I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and drove home through a city that felt, for the first time in a long time, like it was built for people like me too. I never applied. I never responded to Pam's consulting email. I never acknowledged Connor's apology. I just kept building. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's the sound of your name on a door they'll never walk through, attached to a company they'll spend years trying to understand, built by the woman they told wasn't ready. I was always ready. They just weren't paying attention. And now? Now they can't afford to look away.